And this is the sequel, or Charles II, to the territory that Soprano by popular demand. One person, I think, has. And we're not quite sure how long this is going to take, and we probably will have to go for 2 tapes, rather than the one that we had now in the camcorder. I don't think I introduced myself before. I'm Cliff Lutton. We're friends. We're doing this as a friendly undertaking, and for legal purposes, all copyright belong to Charles, as was the case in the first. We're going to get a little bit more personal than we were in the first tape, and I'm going to get right down to it and ask, where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn in 1928.
Brooklyn, in New York, yes, Brooklyn, New York. And you didn't stay in Brooklyn all of your life before coming to Atlanta?
Well, basically I did, except when I was at Columbia. I lived in the dorms at Columbia for 7 years, but I lived in, my domicile was in Brooklyn.
Right.
Until I married and moved to Atlanta at the end of 1952.
But you did some travel abroad?
Yes. Well, the only significant travel abroad was 1948, the year that 1949, which was the year I graduated from college. My friend Jason Epstein and I had found that we both had enough credits to graduate in June at the end of the semester that ended in January. And so we agreed that we would use the money we would spend on dual board tuition for a trip to Europe. Jason subsequently chickened out of the trip. So I took it alone, and I was gone for about, 10 weeks. In England, the Netherlands, France, Switzerland, and Italy, traveling by myself when I was 21 and footloose and fancy-free, and that was a good time and a good way to travel.
Yeah.
I might say in those days we traveled by ship, across the Atlantic, not by freight.
So it took a while to get there.
Yeah, it took about a week each way.
So which countries did you visit?
England, the Netherlands, France, Switzerland, and Italy.
Oh, okay. All right. But later on, you did some other travel in Eastern Europe.
Oh, well, later on, I visited, spent some time in Israel when I was on staff trips with the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League. And with the Anti-Defamation League, we also visited Poland, Warsaw, and Auschwitz before going on to Israel. So altogether, I've had, 2 or 3 trips, maybe 3 trips to Israel. Spent a fair amount of time there, including taking a summer session at the Hebrew University at Jerusalem.
No, I don't remember hearing of that before.
That was, I guess, in 1968.
And we had discussed a lot of what you're going to talk about on tape today. And what I'm going to do mainly is give you some key words or phrases and let them trigger your thoughts, your recollections of what we discussed before. I'm concerned right now that your children and grandchildren have some insight into the influence of your grandparents and parents and the environment in which you grew up on who you became. So Lewis and Rose Katz, Queen, and where were they born?
Well, my mother's parents were Lewis and Rose Katz, and they were both from Tsarist Russia. My mother's family, I think, was from what is now Belarus, Minsk. And I think my grandfather might have come from the Ukraine. Anyway, my grandfather was the manager of a cigar plant in Russia before he emigrated, so that when he came to the United States, he got a job working in as a cigar maker, and joined the Cigar Makers Union here. So he was an early trade unionist. The Gompers. What?
Gompers?
Yeah, Samuel Gompers Union, which is the Cigar Makers Union.
When did they come to?
Oh yes, I wanted to mention the impetus for their emigration for the United States was the 1905 war between Russia and Japan in the Far East, and my grandfather decided that he didn't want to be drafted into the Tsar's army and fight in Siberia against the Japanese, and so he hid in a wagon, covered the hay, and sneaked across the border, and then got a ship in Germany to the United States. And several years later, after he had gotten a job in a park and so forth, he brought the rest of his family over. The rest of his family being, of course, his wife and two daughters. My mother was the eldest daughter, Esther, and then there was Iris. Oh, there were two other daughters, and Gertrude and Iris. And then my Aunt Jenny was born in the United States.
So, Louis and Kate, you already...
Yes, my dad, Kate Wittenstein. My father's parents were Louis and Kate Wittenstein. And Louis Wittenstein was a tailor. And they came over, I think it was still the 19th century. So they came over maybe 10 or 12 years earlier than the Katzes came over. And they were they were what we refer to as Litvaks. That is, Jews who were born in the area around Lithuania. And I might say that the stereotype of Litvaks is cerebral and very sharp.
Martin and Esther Katz Wittenstein.
These were, of course, my parents. My father grew up in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, and he had a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. I think he was one of 9. But his father didn't make much money as a tailor in those days. And so my father had to scratch work and do odd jobs in high school, including, I might say, playing semi-pro baseball, because he could pick up a few bucks that way. Sure. And he was a second baseman right away. However, we could make an extra dollar to help the family out. He did so. Well, I think when he got to about the 11th grade, he had to quit and go get a job. And he went to work for Bryant in the mailroom. And his job was wrapping packages. And he was always very good at wrapping packages. If you had a package you wanted to gift wrap, my father could do a very nice job on it. And of course, Bryant was the only job he ever had. He worked for them the rest of his his career. And but he was on our mailroom, but he got promoted out of the mailroom and subsequently wound up as a buyer in the mail order division of Bryant, as a buyer for hosiery and underwear, corsets, busiers, that sort of stuff. And that was his whole career with one company. Nowadays, that doesn't happen very much.
Less and less.
And my mother, he met my mother because she worked at Bryant. She was the secretary to the vice president in charge of the mail order division.
Oh. Now, did she continue working after they were married?
I don't know whether she did or not. I think that certainly not after my brother was born. My brother was born in 1926.
So she was housewife.
Yes,
That's her brother.
yeah, right.
And I assume that was true of Rose and Kate also.
Yeah, they were always housewives. They were always housewives. My grandparents on both sides kept kosher homes, but my mother and father did not. So I did not go over to kosher home.
Your grandparents were Orthodox, but your home was conservative.
Well, my grandparents were, my father's parents, I guess, were Orthodox. My mother's parents were somewhere between Orthodox and conservative. My grandfather didn't like Rabbi Leventhal and joined, I think, the Brooklyn Jewish Center, which is a conservative congregation. Rabbi Leventhal married my parents at his real age, Leventhal, and he married my brother and his wife. He bar mitzvahed my brother and me, so he was kind of the family rabbi. And the Brooklyn Jewish Center at that time, located on Eastern Parkway, was a very substantial institution. I mean, it not only was a synagogue, but it had a day school, a Sunday school, an afternoon school, and a lot of the facilities that you associate with the community center or YMCA, a pool, gymnasium, and equipment to that sort of thing.
So was it through the bid operation? Was it as large or larger than the Jewish Community Center here in the Lotteries?
Well, probably not quite as large, but of course, it had a large sanctuary, which the Jewish Community Center didn't have. And Rabbi Leventhal was an adjunct professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And he taught homiletics. His sermons were fantastic. I mean, he took great God-given sermons. And people used to come from all over. My friend Mike Andrew became the Federation Director in Atlanta. Used to walk from his home in Granville to the Brooklyn Jewish Center. The bars are hell. It was 34 miles, 3 or 4 miles. On the Sabbath, to hear Rabbi Leventhal preach a sermon, and to hear the Cantor sing. Now, the Cantor was Richard Turner, who became a leading tenor at the Metropolitan Opera Company in New York.
Yeah, I got it.
So the combination of Leventhal preaching and Richard Turner singing was very impressive.
Yeah. And
I mean, they were worth the price of admission.
the combination of your grandparents coming from where they came and working the way they did, and your parents doing the same, must have been very important in shaping your values, and then I guess the synagogue was equally.
Well, I mean, I grew up with a strong sense of Jewish identification. I always knew I was Jewish. My family was Jewish, and that was important. It was important to me then. It's still important to me. It's been important to me all my life. The identification with the Jewish people. I'm not a very religious man, and I don't spend a lot of time in prayer. But I am certainly culturally Jewish.
Well, I'm thinking about the idealism, the emphasis upon justice and community service that seemed to be rooted in your environment and in their parents and in your life in general as a child. Keep knowing it natural for you to choose those paths to travel yourself.
Yeah, then of course I became a professional in Jewish communal agencies, the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League, and that was part of reflection of my strong identification with the Jewish community, and it was also a part of my strong feelings about anti-Semitism and racism.
that developed when I was growing up during the Hitler period in the 1930s and 1940s that had a substantial impact on my thinking and my development.
And you didn't, however, start off as a scholar in elementary school.
And that knock on was, I was getting social promotions really through about the fourth grade. I was not a good student at all.
Well, what turned you around?
I don't know. I think in the fifth grade, I had a very good teacher that got me interested in schoolwork.
I think you mentioned there was somewhere, it must have been about the fourth grade or so, when you were 10 years old, or did you say 9 or 10? Third or fourth grade, you had your first anti-Semitic experience.
Yes. We moved from Sterling Street to Crown Street, both in the same neighborhood in Crown Heights. And across the street from the apartment building in which we lived in Crown Street, there was a large Catholic church and Catholic parochial school. The school was Brooklyn Prep. I don't remember the name of the church. Brooklyn Prep had a large, not always classroom buildings, but athletic facility as well, a running track and football field and so forth. And I remember walking across the street to their schoolyard where they had a handball court. And by myself, I would just throw my ball up against the wall, catching it, throwing it, catching it, throwing it, catching it. And then a couple of boys came out of the parochial school and said to me, "Get out of here. You killed our Christ." I had no idea what I'm talking about. All I know is I never let hand up. That experience
Must have jolted you.
Yes. And I've subsequently found out, of course, that the deicide charge is one of the basic elements of anti-Semitism throughout the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, I think in my lifetime I've seen it greatly diminished.
Oh, it has greatly diminished, and by now the major Christian denominations have all repudiated it. But
I can remember hearing it as a kid.
yeah, the Jews killed Christ, and it was just kind of folklore.
Yeah. No one told me that Christ was a Jew.
And there's some people that still don't believe.
Arthur, your brother.
My brother Arthur was a very intelligent and a very gentle man. He was a lovely man. And he didn't beat me up.
That's nice. And how much older was he?
Locke was 2 years older than I am. Of course, he was always a good student, whereas I didn't become a decent student until I was finishing up elementary school and in high school. But Arthur was always a good student. He was always a gentleman. He was almost perfect. I mean, nobody could find fault with Arthur. He never did anything wrong. And of course, that could not be said for me.
Yeah. Well, he's deceased, right?
What?
Arthur's deceased.
Yes.
On your parents are deceased?
Yes, that's correct.
When did they die? That was a record. That is something that you read through.
My father died about a year after Ruth and Robert were born. They were born in 1958. So he must have died at 1959, yeah. And my father died, I think, about 1957.
So your mother died?
My mother died in the 1970s, I guess. She would, whatever.
Boys High. I've heard you talk many times about the Boys High. And what was the motto of Boys High? Noblesse oblige.
Yes, noblesse oblige.
Was spread the matter of Boys High. Well, Boys High was a peculiar institution because it had no boundaries right by the high schools do. No attendance district. Anybody in the borough of Brookwood could attend. Any boy in the borough of Brookwood could attend.
Did you have to pass a test?
No, it had no test. But it was located in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Bowen, which even in the 1940s was a poor black ghetto. And so it was a peculiar school in that it had no middle class. That is to say, it had a bunch of the neighborhood kids who were going to stay in school as long as the law required, and then look likely to drop out. And then it had the college-bound students that it had attracted from other parts of the borough. So it had a bunch of students whose average was 85 and above, who were college-bound, and then a bunch of students whose average was 75 and below, who would just service their time.
And it must have had good faculty.
And it had some good faculty. At Boys High School, had a good reputation of getting its students into good colleges. And that's why I went. And my brother went.
And you lived outside of the area?
Well, I mean, I was, the attendance district I was in was the district for Adolph High School.
So how far did you have to go?
Well, I mean, I was, these days we talk about busing. I was trolleyed. So I would trolley from Crown Heights to Bedford-Stuyvesant every day. And it was about 5 miles, or 6 miles. Kate, good weather, I walked, but mostly I took the trolley.
And I'm sure Boys High must have been provincial.
Yeah, well, I mean, as they say, a lot of but smart people at Boys High School, and a lot of good students, and some have been on with me to Columbia.
Siberia, Palestine, and Adolph Hitler. What could they suggest?
Oh, let me say one more word about Boys High School. When my brother graduated, he was awarded the DAR Medal for Excellence in American History. And when I graduated, the history teacher came up to me and said, "Wittenstein, you're getting a history medal. Which one do you want?" And I said, "Well, my father got the DAR medals, so I'd like to get the same one he got."
So there was a little bit of a sibling rivalry.
No, I mean, I never thought there was sibling rivalry because I never thought I was really competing with my brother.
He was at Bianca.
Yes, right. And even when we were in college together, and we took a few classes together, there was never a rivalry. I mean, I never considered myself in a race with my brother. I mean, he was just better than me. He was smarter than I was. At any rate, of course, I went off to Columbia, and I had earned 4 years as an undergraduate.
Well, let's go back before that. See if you think of the same things I'm thinking of when that says Siberia, Palestine, and Adolf Hitler.
Oh, well, as I say, the persecution of Jews by the Nazi regime in Germany under Hitler, I think had a very substantial impact on me.
And there was a good deal of persecution yet for Tsarist Prussia.
And there was persecution of Jews by this time in Soviet Russia. Soviet Russia, yes. And I remember, I guess it was about in 1941, when the Germans invaded Russia. I remember my mother getting together some warm clothes for a cousin of hers who was in Russia, and we had heard and been sent to a labor camp in Siberia.
Yeah, right, that was why it was.
Yeah. and we never heard. She sent the clothes, but we never heard that he had gotten them or whatever happened to them. But we assume that he died in the way, in somewhere in the Gulag, in Siberia. Because, of course, under Stalin, as under Hitler, the patriotism of Jews was more than suspect.
Yeah. So these were things in your teens that everybody not to where.
Yes. A part of my mother's family, I might say, had immigrated to Israel, and were among the early settlers in Tel Aviv, when there were just about 2 or 3 paved streets in Tel Aviv, and they were part of that pioneer group of Russian Jews, with Golda, Meir, and the Rabbi family, and so forth.
But not kibbutzim.
Not kibbutzim, no. Right, yeah. My aunt, my mother's cousins were teachers. And I think Warden was a social worker. We knew it.
So you had some affinity, yes?
Yeah, right. And that was part of the Labor Party group, the group that became the nucleus for the Labor Party. In fact, I think Golda Meir's husband was part of my mother's family. And I remember hearing my mother tell me that when Golda's daughter married, Golda was so busy with politics that her aunt kind of made the arrangements for the wedding.
She was a powerful woman.
Yes, she was.
Ebbets here.
We lived in Crown Heights. We lived walking distance of Ebbets Field. And during the summer, because she had no air conditioning in those days, with the windows open, we could hear when somebody hit a home run in Ebbets Field. I mean, the windows were open. You could hear the fan noises from Ebbets Field. And frequently on the weekends, my father would take my brother and me to baseball games. My mother felt like she had the boys all week long. Weekends, my father should take care of us. And one of the ways he did that was to take us to sporting events, mostly baseball games. But before he's finished, he took us to, I think, every sporting event that was performed in the New York City area.
That was a win-win situation.
Yes. And at Ebbets Field, they had a rule: if you could walk under the turnstile, you got in free. And so for years, people would even let you kneel down to walk under the turnstile. So for quite a while when I was young, in the 1930s, I was able to get in free by walking under the turnstile. And of course, we saw some great baseball games. Saw Johnny Buck then in the second consecutive no-hitter, which was pitched on the first night game in Ebbets Field. And my father took us to the 35 for the full All-Star game, where Carl Hubble struck out all those American League sluggers. That game was played in the Polo Grounds. My father got tickets for that. And I remember a couple of World Series games we attended at Ebbets Field that were great games, including one Cookie Wapagetto broke up a no-hitter that the Yankees, Carl Bennis, was pitching against the Braves, against the Dodgers, and the Dodgers won the game.
So you were one of those diehard Brooklyn guys.
I was a diehard Brooklyn Dodgers fan.
What's their legend? Columbia University, we already talked a little bit about it. The differences, I remember you mentioned there were some differences between the medical school and the law school. That with respect to...
Oh no, what it's referring to there is, again, the history of my concern about discrimination. Yeah. I remember when I was an undergraduate at Columbia, that the dean of the medical school had given a speech in which he said the proportion of the student body at Columbia Medical School, that was the College of Physicians and Surgeons, should be proportionate to their roots, a representation in the population as a whole, by which he meant if 3% of the population of the United States was Jewish, then 3% of the entrant class at Columbia Medical School could be Jewish. And since Columbia had an entrant class of 100 students, that means they had a quota of 3 Jews a class. And of course, I had a lot of friends at the college who were pre-med who hoped to go to Columbia Medical School. And I know, and I realized that it meant that a lot of them weren't going to get a chance to go. Now, when I went to law school, and those of us who were Jewish in the law school started looking for jobs, we knew that there were a whole bunch of firms, particularly the large, what we call the white shoe firms, the Wall Street firms, that wouldn't hire Jews at all. And there was no point even going for an interview to them.
That was generally true around the country. Was
Yes, and I found when I moved to Atlanta and entered the practice of law here, that there were law firms that wouldn't hire Jews. Now, I think a lot of that has dissipated.
that began to change right after World War II, the beginning.
Well, not so quickly after World War II.
When it began.
I mean, for example, one of the firms most notorious for their anti-Semitic hiring practices was a large firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, the managing partner of which was John Foster Dukes, who in 1953 became Secretary of State. I graduated in 52 from the law school, and it was still very prevalent in 1952, and for some years thereafter. I think it was probably around the 1960s when things started to loosen up and opportunities opened for Jewish students.
Yeah, I guess we had the mistaken impression that immediately after the war,
No.
a lot of barriers came down at one time. But
Okay, incidentally, one award that I won at Columbia College was an intercollegiate essay contest sponsored by the New York Young Republican Club. And they put this on in 1948, which was the year that Harry Truman beat Thomas E. Dewey. And there were also third-party candidacies by Strom Thurmond for the Dixiecrats and Henry Wallace for the Progressive Party. And the subject of this intercollegiate athletic contest was the role of the third party in the American political system.
at a collegiate, the contest.
The intercollegiate essay contest, the subject was the role of the third party in the American political system. And my professor of government, who was my advisor, Professor Taylor, announced it in class and said that anybody who wanted to enter the contest, their essay would serve as their term paper. He would accept it as a term paper in the government class. And so I entered the contest and won. And I got $100 for that, which I then spent on my trip to Western Europe in the following year.
That was from $100.
$100 was a fair amount of money, yeah. Yeah, that was good money.
And by the way, you ended up in elementary school with self-distinction, as I recall.
Yeah, well, by the time I finished elementary school, I guess I was what you would consider I was captain of the guard force and headed the student body group.
You did have a remarkable turnaround in time.
Yeah, well, for a guy who was getting social promotions through the fourth grade, I guess I started to shape up.
Professor Hofstad.
Yeah, I had a seminar with Hofstadter in American civilization, and I had Chamberlain's seminar in American politics, and I had the colloquium on important books all in my fourth year at college, and I had set up a schedule which I was very proud. Classes only 2 days a week and nothing before 11 a.m.
Or do you?
That wasn't easy.
No.
Because I was taking seminars, it meant once a week.
Is this when you had to read 40 books? Was it 40 books in those days?
Well, I did, we did have very heavy reading in the core curriculum at Columbia, but that was in the first 2 years.
Somewhere I remember from about that period, hearing that Columbia required, I guess, in the first 2 years.
Oh yeah. So in the humanities and temporary civilization class, as I said, that was considered the core curriculum.
The great books.
Great books, yes, right. And I think it's for a good weighting in an education.
Yeah.
And I think it does, and studies are weighting it.
If you have some way of discussing,
Yes, well, of course, right.
well, somebody that knows or knew that book,
That's what you do. At any rate, I had said that Hofstadter and Chamberlain were two professors in my seminars as a senior. And incidentally, they both encouraged me to drop out the 8th semester and go to Europe. I was in law school for about a year. Hofstadter invited me up to his apartment. And he said, "Charles, how are you doing in law school?" I said, "Well, I'm doing pretty well, not great." He said, "Do you know that I went to law school for a year?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." He says, "Yes, my uncle is a judge." So I knew the name of his uncle. His uncle was a New York State Supreme Court justice. And he said, "Well, I went to law school with family pressure. Family for I should be a lawyer like my uncle." And he said, after a year, I dropped out and went to the Graduate School of History. And he said, "If you would like to change to the Graduate School of History, I would support that decision. And I could assure you, when you got your graduate degrees, that you could get a job." Now, Hofstadter was one of the leading American historians and won a couple of Pulitzer Prizes by that time.
These are not empty words.
These are not empty words. He was one of the most outstanding historians in the United States at the time, and a sponsorship by him would have been exceedingly helpful, to say the least. At any rate, I thought about it, and I decided not to stay in law school. So, in part, a wee back.
No, I'm getting a little nervous about running out of tape. I want to think it's a good idea to check it. Okay. Okay, we've just taken a brief break to check on how much time we have left on the tape that we have, and we will continue in the same vein.
Because when I graduated from law school, was when I married Eleanor.
Right.
That was 1952.
You're getting ahead of my story.
Oh.
Yeah. Let's go back just a little bit before that, or there might have been simultaneously, I'm not quite sure. What do you think of when you think of Sam Welcome?
Oh, yes. Welcome was a classmate at Ryan Boys High School, an African-American, a very big fellow, football player, middle linebacker. And I used to sit behind him in a lot of classes where we were arranged alphabetically. And I used to enjoy the teacher calling the Lord, saying, "Welcome, Wittenstein." And when I wanted not to be called on, I could scrunch down behind Sam Welcome, and the teacher wouldn't see me because he was so broad, so big. At any rate, as it turned out, Welcome created some problems for me when I applied for admission to the bar in 1952. That was the New York State Bar.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to cut this off at QuickBooks. I'm not playing.
When we were in Boys High, one day Sam Welcome came to class and said to me, "Charles, I'd like you to address a group of of black youth at a church in Harlem on Saturday, the such a day. He said, my brother is involved in an organization, and we're having a big rally at this church in Harlem, and we'd like you to represent Jewish youth. And I said, Sam, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I have a bar mitzvah to go to that day, and I'm just not available. The truth of the matter is I did not have a bar mitzvah to go to. I just didn't want to spend my Saturday riding all the way up to Harlem in the subway and killing my whole day. So I didn't have any idea what I would say as a representative of Jewish youth.
You did represent Jewish.
I didn't feel like a representative. I didn't feel like I represented anybody. At any rate, I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. About 4 weeks later, Sam comes to class, and he has a printed program. And on the printed program, it lists Charles Wittenstein representing Jewish youth. And I said, Sam, I told you I couldn't make it. Why did you do that? And he said, oh, my brother put your name down. I'm sorry about that. But your name was down. You got to come. You know, we really got to have it. And I said, Sam, I'm sorry. I told you I wasn't coming. I'm not coming. And I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. When I applied for admission to the New York State Bar, they have a character committee. You have to go before that, pass the character committee. In addition to passing the bar exam, I passed the bar exam. And at the character committee, I was being questioned by a lawyer who was your basic Irish McCarthyite. And he said to me, Wittenstein, your name is in the files of the House Committee on Un-American Activities and in the FBI files. I said, well, you know, how come that? He said, well, you addressed a meeting of a group that's on the Attorney General Subversive list at a church in Harlem in such and such a time. And I realized that must have been the thing that Sam Welcome tried to get me involved in, which I never went to. And that somebody from the FBI covered the meeting and brought back a copy of the printed program. And there I was on the printed program.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this was the period in 1952 when McCarthyism was at its height. And as it happened, I was applying for jobs in the Justice Department. And the Justice Department was very leery about hiring people whose name who was listed in the FBI files and the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Now, let me say that going back to the character committee for a moment, this guy questioned me about the fact that I was a member of the American Civil Liberties Union. And in fact, I had worked as a volunteer for the ACLU at the national headquarters between my first and second year of law school, or maybe between my second and third year of law school or whatever. He questioned me about the ACLU and my views as to whether a communist should be allowed to teach in the public schools and so forth. And he said,
You were already guilty as far as he is concerned.
yeah, that's right. And he finally said to me, Wittenstein, I'd like to keep you out, but I don't think we can. But we're going to keep an eye on you. Meaning I better behave myself. So I passed a character committee in New York, and I got admitted to the New York bar. And as I say, I was applying for jobs in the Justice Department. And I had very good interviews with the Antitrust Division and with the Elite Properties Division and with the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District, for Manhattan. Or I guess with the Manhattan District. At any rate, one of them said to me, you know, I got a recommendation for you from, by that time, Dean Lawrence Shable, he had become the Dean of Columbia College. And he said, this is the best letter of recommendation I've had for anybody, ever.
but at the other job, at any of the jobs at the Justice Department. And they were all afraid with the Republicans coming into power in 1952. Eisenhower won the election that year. That they would be vulnerable if they hired somebody who was on the FBI files list and has American Activities Committee. So I was pretty much thwarted in my plan to go to work for the Justice Department.
Now, Morris Abram, speaking of this, and how he,
Morris had a brother-in-law who was an important attorney at the Justice Department, and Morris checked with his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law pretty much confirmed that was a problem for me, and that also thought that maybe being Jewish was also still a problem with the Justice Department.
Well, who were some of your friends some of your other friends at Columbia?
Well, of course, there were people like Judith Ebbets and Howard Weiss and Irving Land and Stan Harwood, Maury Brill, Rick Lowe. They were most of the law school. Some of them were law school or college. Ribbets and Irving Lang were in college with me as well as in law school. As a matter of fact, Ribbets grew up at the Brooklyn Jewish Center and was at Boys High School with me.
that you kept in touch with?
Yeah, I'm in touch with many of them. And I don't even remember people that has that extra. And one of the other people, of course, I remember from Boys High School and Columbia College is Norman Podhoretz, who became the editor of himself as editor of Cantor magazine for many years. Famous. Yes, a leader of the New York intelligentsia.
And you mentioned the Lester Baker who got here.
Yes, Lester was in college, and Lester, when he graduated from college, took a year at the Sorbonne, and then enlisted in the U.S. Army in Paris. Lester had planned to be a star, and to avoid being drafted and serving in Korea, he joined the army in Europe and served his 3 years in Europe. And when he came back, decided that he wanted to be a doctor, and that he had always wanted to be a doctor, but he didn't want to. He had avoided the decision so as not to follow in his older brother's footsteps. At any rate, what I recall is a conversation with Lester in the dormitory at Columbia, and I guess we were talking as undergraduates often do about the meaning of life and what we were going to do when we finished. And I remember Lester saying, and I think maybe this had an impact on me. He said, I think we have an obligation to leave the world a little better than we found it. To make even just a small improvement. And he said, maybe all we will do is contribute 0.0001% improvement. But, that's enough. At least you've made a contribution. Now, Lester went on to become a doctor, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and one of the leading experts in juvenile diabetes in the United States, maybe in the world. And Lester was Doctor of the Year for the American Diabetes Association one year. So Lester has made his contribution with treating and research on juvenile diabetes. And I would like to think that I've made 0.0001 contribution in terms of intergroup relations, race relations, community relations, and
Anyone who knows you, I think, to confirm that that's indeed been the case. I would guess it's more than 0.000.
well, I mean, I've tried to make a contribution, And my work in helping to demolish Kip Crow and in supported civil liberties, I think has been constructive. And generally opposing discrimination based on race, origin, creed, national origin, ethnicity, and so forth.
Well, let's go quickly to someone that I know has been a big help to you in this, and Eleanor. Hey, but
Well, I married Eleanor in 1952 after I graduated from law school. She had graduated through Smith in 1950 and had been a classmate of my brother's wife and me at Smith. They both lived in Garmaps at Smith. So that after Ella graduated from college, she moved to New York and she took a job at the Macmillan Publishing Company, where she became an editor of college textbooks. And when she was living in New York, in Chelsea on 23rd Street, my sister-in-law, Aileen, suggested that I might like Eleanor Hyman, and I ought to meet her. And so she arranged a date for me. And I dated Eleanor thereafter for the balance of, I guess, that was at the time I was at law school. And then, as I said, we married in 1952. And I was having some problems with my efforts to get a job at the Justice Department. My father-in-law made me an offer to join Hyman Abram and Young. And at the end of 1952, after I had been admitted to the New York bar, we moved to Atlanta.
now Eleanor's family has also been important.
Yes, well,
I think especially your mother, but maybe others.
yeah, well, her father was an important influence for me because I back and forth with her father for 5 years. And we used to ride back and forth to town in his car. And so we got to know each other pretty well. And he was a man I admired enormously. He had a very high level of integrity and a brilliant legal mind and great memory. I mean, he was just an outstanding lawyer.
But Drew Lepkox, who you referred to when I needed the lawyer, spoke extremely highly of this as his mentor.
Yes. Well, Herman was a great lawyer, and he was a fine man. As a matter of fact, the Hyman family is just an outstanding family in terms of their personal integrity and their decency, and so that they're the best citizens that a community could have.
Yeah, I didn't know him, of course, and I didn't really know the others, but I met some of them for 20 years ago, I guess. And
Of course, Herman's father was a lawyer here in Atlanta. He was a member of the law firm of Dorsey, Brewster, Howell, and Hyman. Dorsey having been the prosecutor in the Leo Frank case. And Arthur Hyman was a partner of his. So Arthur Hyman practiced here, and then Herman Hyman joined his father in practice here. And then I joined Herman, and now my son David is a fourth-generation lawyer.
well, there was a brief stint in Columbus, Ohio.
Yes, when I decided to leave the active practice of law, having gotten very interested in the work of the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League as a volunteer. Both those agencies offered me jobs, one in Chicago and one in Columbus. And since the salaries were the same and the cost of living was lower in Columbus, I took the job at Columbus. With the ADL, Morris incidentally also advised me to take ADL at the McDC.
This is Marzay.
Yes, Marseille.
although he subsequently became president of the American Jewish Committee. Morris said ADL has a better staff. Anyway, we lived in Columbus, Ohio for a year and a half when David was a baby, and Eleanor gave birth to twins, Ruth and Robert. And she had 3 children, 2 years and younger. And it was really something. We had no support system up there. So that when an American Jewish Committee job opened up in Atlanta for the area director of the American Jewish Committee, they offered it to me. And we moved back to Atlanta, where I wanted to at least have family around her, and help and support her while I worked. And because we both raised 3 great children. And I think Eleanor gets the lion's share of the credit for that, because she did a lot more for childhood than I did.
She did work, though, didn't she?
Eleanor only worked until David was born.
Then she did volunteer work.
Later on, she did volunteer work she was very active in the Atlanta section of the National Council of Jewish Women.
Well, here are some names that will help paint a picture of the atmosphere here in the latter and to some extent later in Birmingham during the 50s and 60s when you got here, and shortly after that. You'll recall James P. Westbury, Cecil Alexander, Sarah Mitchell, and Sam Williams and Don McAvoy.
Yes. Don McAvoy, I think we mentioned in the first tape, was the director of the National Conference of Christians in Jewish here, and he was a friend of mine. Don and I thought it would be a good idea to organize a group of educators and lay people, capitalist Protestants and Jews, to discuss the issue of prayer in model schools. This was right after the U.S. Supreme Court had issued its opinion in the New York Regent's prayer case, which I think was Engel versus Fatality, in which the Supreme Court threw out the Regent's prayer in New York. And because in Georgia we had a statute that required the reading of the Lord's Prayer in school every day. And they were percolating up in the federal court system 2 other cases. One was Shep versus Abington Township in Pennsylvania, and the other was Murray versus Baltimore. That's Madeline O'Hare Murray, the well-known atheist, and Sue Baltimore, or maybe it was Carrie Baltimore, I don't know, where they also had prayer requirements. And McAvoy and I figured that this case was going to go to the Supreme Court be decided in the Supreme Court the following year. And we were pretty sure that the Supreme Court would hold these prayers unconstitutional. So we thought it would be a good idea to get the community ready for some of that. And we organized this little route, which met first at Cecil Alexander's home at the first meeting, and then had a second meeting at Don McAvoy's home in Decatur, or Avondale. At any rate, one of the participants, among the participants in this group, were the people you mentioned. The Reverend James B. Westbury, who was the pastor of the Morningside Baptist Church. Sam Williams, who was a professor of philosophy at Morehouse College. And I think the pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church. Sarah Mitchell was a white lady who was a member of the Atlanta Board of Education. At the meeting at McAvoy's house, the second meeting of the group, I restated what was the position of the Jewish community about church state. And this is basically an ancestors position that there ought not to be prayer in school, and that the First Amendment prohibited state sponsorship of prayer. And when I finished restating that position, the Reverend Westbury turned to me and said, "You, meaning you Jews, are guests in a Christian home, and you're welcome as long as you obey the rules passed. And if you try to upset those rules, you will experience an anti-Semitic episode like you haven't seen in your lifetime. In other words, we're going to come down on you." On this occasion, one started to really exercise some self-restraint.
So maybe that would be called terroristic threatening. What?
Maybe. I did something uncharacteristic. When he finished, I kept my mouth shut.
Well,
I decided I would let the Christians in the room respond, or hope that the Christians in the room responded. And the first one to respond was Sarah Mitchell. And Sarah Mitchell said, Reverend Westbury, I'm a Methodist. She was a very active Methodist lady. And I just thought I could have Christian all her life. And I always thought that a part of being Christian is you hurt people. And you're talking about earning deep. And she said, "That's wrong, that's not Christian, and that's my idea of Christian." No. And when she finished, Sam Williams came into the conversation. Now, Sam Williams, by the way, in addition to being a minister and a professor, was also the chairman of the Mayor's Community Relations Commission. And Sam Williams had a radio-like mind, and his tongue was as sharp as his mind. When he proceeded to cut Reverend Westbury up in 4 pieces, I mean, he just took his position apart. And I was looking at Westbury as Sarah Mitchell talked, and then as Sam Williams talked, and he was getting redder and redder. I was afraid that Reverend Westbury was going to have a stroke. Because, as I say, he was looking almost apoplectic. Finally, instead of an outburst, he just stood up and stomped out of the house. I mean, he was speechless. He could not respond, and didn't. And that was the end of that dialogue. And that was the end of our efforts to try to prepare the community for the Supreme Court decision on prayer in schools. And of course, that was still raging.
yeah. What in particular you say incensed him so much?
Well, he was not used to being contradicted by a Jew, a woman, and a black. And I think that was a factor. But also, he had a passionately held belief, a sincerely held belief, that we were trying to undermine the foundation of his America.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah. There's still people who hold that belief.
yes, right. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's move on. And what comes to mind when you think about the Piedmont Driving Club and the American Bar Association and their...
A number of years ago, the American Bar Association, I guess this was in the 80s sometime, American Bar Association has midwinter meeting in Atlanta. And as is customary at ABA meetings, the major national law schools have a reception for their alumni attending the meeting. And so I got a notice in the mail from the Columbia Law School Alumni Association inviting me to a reception of that association at the Piedmont Driving Club. And I had to see it. I called up the dean of the law school, who happened to be in Europe at the time, and I spoke to an associate dean, and I said, you know, this is not acceptable. You may or may not have known this, but the Piedmont Driving Club discriminates against blacks, Jews, and women. And a lot of our alumni are blacks, Jews, or women. And those alumni will not feel either welcome or comfortable at the Piedmont Driving Club. And I strongly suggest that you move the function to a place of public accommodation where everybody would feel welcome and comfortable. And the guy I was talking to said, gee whiz, he said, we'd have to send out 23,000 postcards if we changed the location of the reception. I said, I guess you're going to have to send out 23,000 postcards then. A few days passed, and I got a call from a lawyer in Atlanta who was a named partner in one of the major firms, whose law partner was a former president of the American Bar Association, E. Smythe Gambrell, for whom this new Emory Law School building is named. This was Russell. Gambrell Russell was the first two names of the firm. And Mr. Russell, it turns out, was a past president of the Columbia Alumni Association, Law School Alumni Association. And he had made the arrangements for the meeting at the Piedmont Driving Club. And he tried to persuade me to withdraw my objection. And we must have talked on the phone for 40 or 45 minutes. And he was telling me that what a nice opportunity this would be for the out-of-town lawyers to see the Piedmont Driving Club. And I said, well, you know, I think this is, the law school has no business using a facility of this kind. And I trust that they're going to move. And if they don't move, I will go public with my objection. And he tried to persuade me to, well, if I wasn't going to withdraw the objection, at least to keep my mouth shut and not to embarrass the law school. I said, no, I'm sorry, but this is, for me, a matter of principle. And so I'm not going to remain silent about it. After I finished talking to him, I called up a couple of my law school friends, particularly friends who were not Jewish, and asked them to communicate with the law school that they thought this was a mistake, a serious mistake, to hold a reception at the Piedmont Driving Club. And I started some ball rolling in that direction. As it happened, that year, the outgoing and incoming presidents of the American Bar Association were both alumni of Columbia Law School. And Arnold Forster, who was the general counsel of the Anti-Defamation League, knew both of them. And I talked to Arnold about it. And of course, Arnold fully supported what I was doing. Anyway, it also turned out that at that time, I had forgotten about it, but the dean, fairly recently appointed dean of Columbia Law School, was Jewish. At any rate, I guess when he came back to the United States, he was advised at trial, and then they moved to the Peachtree Plaza Hotel. And when Columbia moved, that started the ball rolling, because a number of the other law schools also, who had scheduled, if not for the Piedmont Driving Club, then for the Capital City Club or the Charity Club, So a whole group of law schools started moving their sections out of the discriminatory private clubs. And the American Bar Association itself had functions scheduled at these three clubs. And they started moving out and changing locations. So by the time the midwinter meetings opened, about 23 functions had been moved out of the discriminatory private clubs. Subsequently, the American Bar Association adopted a rule that it would not meet at discriminatory private clubs. And that was a basic change in the policy of the American Bar Association. That was the first time, as far as I know, that it was enunciated as a Bar Association policy. Now, I think that the significance of it went, however, beyond that. This was a shot across the bow for the private clubs in Atlanta.
What year was that in?
Well, I think it was, I don't remember exactly, my guess is 1980s, probably 1980s, late 1970s, somewhere around there. I think they recognized that when, they could get by with functions where there were local groups, nobody would raise a stink about it. But when they were dealing with national groups, this was going to create a problem. Once the city was awarded the 1996 Olympics, I think the clubs realized, number one, that they wanted to hold a lot of functions in the sections and dinners and lunches at the clubs in connection with the Olympics, and number two, that they weren't going to be able to do it if they maintained their discriminatory policies. I had become alerted to it. I think it was one of the early years that I was in Atlanta in the 1950s. Every year the Metropolitan Opera Company came to Atlanta for a week's performances. And every year after the opening night performance, there was a reception for the cast and the leaders of the Opera Guild at the Piedmont Driving Club. Well, one year the Metropolitan announced that their opening performance was going to be Aida, and Leontine Price was going to be the lead singers. Well, what was the Piedmont Driving Club going to do? What they finally decided to do was shut down for repairs and refurbishing.
What do they still come here?
No, I think now the policy has changed, and I think they've admitted at least token numbers of women and blacks and Jews. And I think that's probably true. The Capital City Club as well, Piedmont Garden Club. I'm not aware of a change in the Cherokee Club, although there may be one. I don't think the Cherokee Club sounded as much of a power as the Capital City Club did, the Piedmont Garden Club. Although the Cherokee Club, when it was founded, right after the Second World War, included some prominent members of the Jewish community, a couple of whom I've mentioned before, the Cecil Alexanders and the John Franklins. And after making a start with people like that in the membership, the Cherokee Club decided to change its policy and asked us to leave. And we kind of reorganized as a club that was unified. At any rate, the issue came up from time to time as when Burt Lance and Griffin Bell were being were subject to Senate confirmation for their appointment in the cabinet of President Jimmy Carter. And I started getting telephone calls from news media all over the country asking me about their membership in the Piedmont Driving Club and the Capital City Club. And I remember having told a couple of reporters that the only way an African American, I would have said at that time a black person, could get into the Piedmont Driving Club is wearing a white coat and carrying a tray. I mean, there was no question as to what the policy was. And so what I think both of them had to do was resign from the class. But then after they left the Carter administration, I think they both rejoined.
Yeah. Different subject now. You mentioned that early on you were not particularly religious, but then somewhere when your kids were going to Sunday school, somehow you became a Sunday school teacher.
Yes, well, I became a Sunday school teacher because I had to drive them back and forth every Sunday anyhow. And if I was going to take them to Sunday school and I was going to bring them home from Sunday school, I might as well do something while waiting for them to finish. And so I took on an assignment for 3 years of teaching a Sunday school class for 8th graders in the prophets and in ethics. And I quit after 3 years because I felt like I was not an effective teacher. First of all, I had no pedagogical skills or training at all. I just talked. And I think some of my vocabulary was probably inappropriate for 8th graders. Where sometimes I'm sure they just didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, I may have been using some word with which they were unfamiliar. And anyway, I would look out at the class, and there'd be 25 kids in the class, and I'd see about 22 red faces. And I finally said to myself, I'm not getting through to these kids. I ought to let somebody try it who has a better chance of getting through than you. Probably would get into more than the other. Well, it turned out that I was. In later years, when some of these kids had grown up, and I would run into them, a couple of them said to me, "You were the best Sunday school teacher we ever had." I'm flabbergasted. What it tells me that they looked like they weren't paying any attention, but some of them were actually listening to what I was saying. At any rate, I started reading the Bible more and became rather more familiar with passages in it. And so later on, as I think I may have mentioned to you, when we came to the Leo Frank case and were submitting our brief of application for a posthumous pardon, and the Board of Pardons and Paroles had asked us, why are you pursuing this case that's 70 years old? And we put into the application for the posthumous pardon that we felt we had a mandate from the book of Deuteronomy. Justice, justice, shalt thou pursue. And we then went on to point out that there's no statute of limitations that the Bible had put on the pursuit of justice. You're always supposed to continue pursuing it. And that was our rationale for continuing to pursue the vindication of Leo Frank, who was falsely charged with murder, convicted of murder, in the trial that was unfair. At any rate, when I turned 65, the children gave me as a birthday present a framed lithograph of that quote from Deuteronomy, which hangs in my living room. I'm still not religious in the sense that I engage in prayer and so forth, but the ethical precepts of Judaism and the prophetic teachings still lead a great deal of command and are an integral part, really, of my outlook on life. Although the ritualistic observances I pretty much reject.
Well, you had a real learning experience, and I'm sure that those kids did too. You probably gave them the challenge that they weren't getting elsewhere, and they were stunned, but taking it in. Okay, I've got some more names here. Chuck Morgan. And this, I think we came to Birmingham?
Yes. Chuck Morgan used to be a lawyer in Birmingham, Alabama. He was one of the few white Whipples in Birmingham, Alabama. And after the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, he made a speech that was widely reported in Birmingham, in which he blamed the bombing on the community's attitude toward blacks, and generally its approach to race relations in general. And Chuck was run out of town. He then came over to Atlanta and set up an ACLU office, and then went on to work for ACLU in Washington, and then went into private practice. Anyway, whenever I would go to Birmingham, Chuck Morgan would be one of my stops. And I remember one occasion when he and I and the third fellow, name I don't recall, were having drinks at the Tutwiler Hotel in Birmingham before dinners. And this third guy was from an intergroup relations agency in New York, Philadelphia. And Morgan said to him, "I bet I can tell you what room you're staying in." And he said, "That's ridiculous. How would you know what room I'm staying in?" Morgan said, "Well, I bet you're staying, in, just for example, room 623, just picking a number because I don't remember what number he mentioned." And the guy reaches into his pocket and he pulls out a key and looks at it and he says, "That's right. How did you know that?" And Morgan said, "Well, that's the room they put all the outside agitators into. The Yankee troublemates." And he said, that's the room that's bugged.
Were you ever in that?
No, I don't think I was. But I also remember a story that somebody told me in Birmingham, and it may have been Morgan, about another guy from the North who was an integrationist, who came back to his room and found that his portfolio was missing. And he went down to the desk and he said, "I've been robbed. All my papers are gone." And he says, I need to get my files back. And the desk clerk said, "Don't worry about a Fed. When the police are finished copying them, you'll get them back." That taught me that I must never leave my portfolio or my papers lying around. This was during the Volcano year in Birmingham. And when you went to Birmingham, you were in enemy territory. And the state was opposed to what you were trying to do. And the police were opposed to it. And you better be damn careful.
Bill Engel and Volocon.
Well, Bill Engel was a leader of the Jewish community and a leader of the business community in Birmingham, as he was a very successful real estate and insurance man. After the Second World War, as I recall, he started up a bank called the Anti-Semitic, in which he was the principal stockholder. And after a number of years, probably 10 to 15 years, the Birmingham Trust Company and the Banks of Savings merged, the Birmingham Trust Company being a larger institution and the dominant one in the merger. And under the agreement between Birmingham Trust and Bank to Savings, 3 members of the board of the Bank to Savings were going to be put on the board of the merged bank. When the Birmingham Trust came out with their list of directors, lo and behold, Bill Engel's name was not on it. And he was the principal shareholder in Bank to Savings. They had just left him off the board of his own bank. And a few days later, Bill told me he got a visit from an executive at the Birmingham Trust Company who said to him, "I'm not Jewish, but my grandfather was Jewish. and I can't stand what's going on here. He said, you were left off because you were Jewish. And they said at the Birmingham Trust, we don't have to worry about a proxy fight. The Jews won't fight back. Bill decided to fight back. And the proxy fight was organized. Bill's brother was Irving M. Engel in New York, who was a very successful corporate lawyer in New York and who was the past president, national president in the American Jewish Committee. And my wife Eleanor's uncle, Mervyn Stern, was the leading investment banker in Birmingham. So Bill and his brother Irving and Uncle Mervyn started to organize a proxy fight in which a lot of people took part. General Friend, dead Friend, who was a prominent lawyer at Birmingham, lawyer named Berkowitz, even Rabbi, the rabbi of the congregation got into the act. And the leading black businessman, what did I say his name was? I'd forgotten. Whose motel became the headquarters for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference during the protests. A.G. Gaston. Mr. Gaston gave his proxy to Bill Engel. So they went rounding up proxies all over town wherever they could get them. And I think when they counted the votes over at the Birmingham Trust, they realized that the proxy fight was successful, that the Engel faction had not only enough to elect 3 directors, but probably 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And they threw in the towel. Mm-hmm. I recently had an opportunity to talk to Bill Engel's son, Marvin, about this. Bill is, of course, deceased by now. And Bill said he thinks after Irving left the board a number of years later, he said they still don't have a Jew on the board in that bank.
Right, yeah. So they reversed.
But what was important for me at the time was that the morale of the Jewish community was very much involved in this proxy fight. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the Jews felt if they could do this to a guy as important and wealthy as Bill Engel, they can run any of us out.
Yeah. And this was post-World War II.
Oh, absolutely. This was shortly before the big racial demonstrations in Birmingham. This was before those SCLC-sponsored demonstrations took place, before Martin King was in the Birmingham jail and so forth. But not so long before that, maybe a couple of years.
Now, you mentioned there in one conversation that there's an interesting relationship between the Klan and Bull Connor.
Oh, well, when I first got to Birmingham, I was shocked to find that there were Jews who were supporters of Bull Connor. Mm-hmm. And I said, what are you doing supporting Bull Connor? And they said, well, as long as Bull is in charge of Birmingham, they don't have any Klan activity in Birmingham. I said, well, if you got Bull Connor, what do you need a Ku Klux Klan for? He does the show-offs. He does the work. Well, subsequently, by the way, I was talking about Bill Engel a little while ago. Bill Engel gave a speech which was reported on the front page of the Birmingham Morning newspaper the next day, in which he denounced Bull Connor. And he said, I got a call from Bull Connor in the office bright and early. And he said, Bull said to me, Bill, he says, I know the newspapers how often was quoting people. And you can't take it, I can't take at face value what the newspapers say about me.
So I figure you've been misquoted. And Joe Engel said to him, as he told me, Bull, not only have I not been misquoted,
But that wasn't the half of it.
and that was the end of any relationship between Bill Engel and Bull Connor. I mean, I guess they had, they knew each other, and but that was the clean break.
Now, you had said that you didn't really have much to do with Betty King or Martin Jr. Of course, you knew it, and you met them, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. And most of my dealings with SCLC were through Andy Young. You know, when I had something I wanted to talk to SCLC about, I'd call Andy or go to see Andy or whatever. But I knew mine, and both of our sons went to the same play group at the Quaker House on Fairview Road, because we wanted our son David to have an interracial experience. And at that time, he was about 7 or 8 years old, that the DeKalb County public school system had not desegregated at all. And Coretta and Martin wanted their son Martin to have an interracial experience as well. So both boys were enrolled in this storytelling group, but at the Quaker House.
So they were presumably friends.
Well, I mean, they got on that. They were playmates, yes. Yeah.
Well, Andrew Young and Vernon Jordan owe a trip to Israel to you.
Yes, I guess it was about 1965. The American Jewish Committee got a grant to send 10 or 12 leading young blacks to Israel so that they would have some exposures to Israel and its bombers. And the American Jewish Committee was to pick the up-and-coming young blacks who should go on this trip. And I got to name 2 of the 10 or 12. And my 2 selections were Andy Young and Vernon Jordan. Of course, at that time, Vernon Jordan was virtually unknown. Andy Young was better known because of his role in SDLC. But Vernon was virtually unknown. And I thought I made some pretty good selections.
Yeah,
At any rate,
they're certainly well known now.
yes, it's certainly well known now. They went to Israel, I think it was just before the 6-Day War, which was 1967. We came back, and they made a couple of speeches after they returned, sympathetic and understanding of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Well, your activities have not only been to bring civil rights and reform to the greater community, but you've also been involved in some reforms in the Jewish community here at the temple.
Oh, nothing of any great consequence.
Oh.
Bob Wickshoots, who was the president of the temple and all, I think played an active role in getting a couple of policies changed at the temple. One was the policy that prohibited bar mitzvah. We thought it was important to allow for bar mitzvah for those families that didn't want it.
Well, having been to my grandson's bar mitzvah, I am very much impressed by the potential importance of that ceremony in the life of a boy, of becoming a man. I was very, very much impressed, favorably impressed by his bar mitzvah. And it's hard for me to imagine a Jewish community that didn't allow it.
Well, there are very few that don't. But Rabbi Rothschild's feeling at the time was the religious significance of the occasion got lost in the large and elaborate, expensive parties. And also that the boys dropped out of Sunday school once they were bar mitzvah. At the temple, they stayed in Sunday school until they were confirmed at age 16. So he he thought that was, you keep them longer in their religious education if they were not bar mitzvah and went on to confirmation. So that was his rationale. And the other rule that I changed, or was active in changing, was a rule prohibiting the serving of hard liquor at the temple. And people did an old wedding receptions at the temple because they couldn't serve liquor. They only served wine, and basically wine, maybe beer too. And I remember I was shocked. The members of my family were when they came down for our wedding at the temple, and they could, all they could get was champagne. And my family included a number of Scotch drinkers.
Yeah, well, I imagine the congregation is happier.
Yeah, and the temple gets to host some receptions that it didn't host before, and that's a source of income for them as well. See? By the way, we were talking a little while ago about Alabama and Birmingham, and I'm reminded of a trip I took to the Tennessee River Valley in the 1980s. The Anti-Defamation League had a tradition of doing fact-finding on extremist groups that were a threat to the Jewish community and to the democratic tradition. And to boost it, we thought were terrorists. And of course, principal among these was the Ku Klux Klan. And because of the high level of maybe this was in the 70s, back in the 70s, because of the high level of Ku Klux Klan activity in Alabama, we decided that we needed it, a better source of information on Klan activities. And so the National Director of Fact Finding, ADL, when Sue and I took a trip into the Tennessee River Valley, I think we visited Tikkun, Huntsville, and Gadsden, and cities like that. And we did find somebody who was not a member of the Ku Klux Klan, but who was in close association with them. And we put him on the payroll to provide us with additional information, which we couldn't have otherwise gotten, and it was really very useful. And anyway, just about a week or 10 days before we were scheduled to make this trip, I was watching the CBS Evening News, and lo and behold, my face pops up on the screen. This was an interview I had given a couple of years earlier, which I was talking about the Ku Klux Klan. And they had put it in the can on the shelf, and I had forgotten about it. But there I am, largest wife on television screen. And I was concerned that I would be recognized if we went into some diner for lunch. Some Klan would say, "Didn't I just see you last week on television bad-mouthing the Ku Klux Klan?" So I called up one of my FBI friends, and I said to him, "I just want you to know that if they find my body floating downriver in the Tennessee River, I'm not going there for a swim. And I'm concerned about the fact that I was just my face was just on television." And I said, "What do you think I ought to do about it?" And he said, "Well, first of all," he said, "I don't think too many Klansmen watch CBS Evening News. So that already lowers your risk. But second of all, my advice to you is shave off your beard, and they probably won't recognize you at all." So I shaved off my beard, and I went to Decatur and Huntsville, and nobody identified me as Charles Wittenstein with the Anti-Defamation League. And of course, we also did, I said we did fact-finding on extremists in the Klan. And another group that was concerned to the Anti-Defamation League was our terrorists.
Yeah.
And we did some fact-finding on them too. And I remember particularly
at the time of the 1976 Olympics, which were held in Montreal. A friend of mine who was active in the community came to me and said, there's a guy who just checked into a hotel in Montreal, and he's got a suitcase full of cash. And he's going to use that cash to organize students to have a demonstration in Montreal. The demonstration will march through a Jewish neighborhood. And then they'll start to throw stones and break windows in Jewish shops. And, that's the kind of thing that we're really needing to know about.
So what did you do?
So I called the FBI, and I told them what the guy's name was and what hotel he was in Montreal. And the FBI called the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And the RCMPs went to pay a call on this guy, and they found him in the hotel that I had said he would be in. And sure enough, he had a suitcase full of cash. He was going to pay the students, like $25 a piece to participate in this demonstration. But some people in the demonstration were going to be alerted to start throwing rocks and to create a riot. Well, the RCMP just put about claiming them the hell out of the country in a hurry. Yeah. And the demonstration never came off. There was another occasion, I think, where my informant identified a terrorist who was going to go to the main bus station in Tel Aviv with explosive in the suitcase, I guess, were packets. And we informed the Israelis of this report. We didn't know whether it was true or not, but we passed the information along to the Israelis, and that caught an eye with explosives heading for the bus station in Tel Aviv. No telling how many lives were saved by that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's very important if you can get early warning of some events that they're going to threaten life and property.
Tell me about the Klan's anti-mask law.
Well, the Klan and the anti-mask, the ADL had passed an anti-mask law, or had initiated the passage of an anti-mask law in Georgia in 1951, which was the year before I moved to Atlanta. And the prime movers had been Morris Abram, Alex Miller, who was the ADL director at that time, and the legislator that introduced it was Osgood Williams of Culver County, a small, fairly poor county in East Georgia. Osgood subsequently moved to Atlanta and became a judge of the Folk Superior Court. He was just a splendid fellow. At any rate, ADL had developed the model of an anti-mask law, and Morris had adapted it to the Georgia situation, and he and Alex wrote a pamphlet on why we needed an anti-mask law. And Osgood one day walked into Morris's office and said, "You're looking for somebody to introduce this legislation. I'm available." So Osgood introduced the legislation, and for reasons that I never entirely understood, I think Herman Talmadge signed it. As I say, I wasn't here at the time it was passed, and so I don't recall what the political maneuverings were behind that.
No.
At any rate, the law was on the books for a number of years, and at one point in the 1980s, the Ku Klux Klan decided, with the support of the American Civil Liberties Union, that it would challenge the anti-mask law. By this time, we had had decisions which held that symbolic speech was protected by the First Amendment. such as the wearing of a black armband during the Vietnam War, or peace symbol signs, or a Catholic teacher wearing a crucifix. These were a symbolic speech and protected by the First Amendment. And so the theory was that the wearing of the mask and the hood was symbolic speech expressing one's support of racial segregation and separation of the races. And so the Klan recruited a fellow new member and sent him into the square at Lawrenceville in Gwinnett County. And they notified the police he was coming, what day and time he was going to arrive at the square already, and he would be wearing a full robe mask and hood, and the police of course were waiting for him. And very shortly after he stepped out of his pickup truck, they busted him. And the trial was held in Lawrenceville, and the Klansman was represented by Michael Houghton, the former head of the Georgia ACLU. And I was scheduled, and I was the leading expert witness in the state on the Klux Klan. So I was in the courtroom to testify. And in walks Michael Houghton, and he's wearing a large sterling silver cross of David from one ear, as an ear, a Star of David as an ear. And I said, Michael, why are you wearing a Star of David earring? And Howard said to me, to irritate my clients. And there must have been 30 Klansmen sitting in that courtroom at the time. And anyway, our theory was that the hood and the mask, along with the robe, were not just an expression of opinion or symbolic speech, but their main purpose was as a threat and to intimidate Jews and blacks. And in fact, the message that it delivered was, you don't know what I've got under my robe, but I can beat the crap out of you and you will never be able to identify me in a lineup because my head and face are covered. So don't think twice about going to vote because, we'll get you. And I testified that the Klan regalia inspired fear among Jews and blacks, and had exactly the effect that I thought the Klan intended, which was to deter people from exercising their constitutional rights to vote and do other things. So we won in the trial court, and I think we won, sure. And anyway, the case was appealed directly to the Georgia Supreme Court. My recollection may be hazy as to which side won below and who therefore filed the appeal in the Georgia Supreme Court. At any rate, when the case got to the Georgia Supreme Court, ADL filed a brief amicus curiae on behalf of the state's position that the law was constitutional. And I worked closely with the Assistant Attorney General of Georgia who was handling the case.
And later on, you were involved in...
By the way, in the Georgia Supreme Court, we won that case.
Yeah.
And that was an important victory for us. Although, to tell you the truth, some of my legal experts in New York thought we were going to lose.
Well, the argument seems, just on the base of it, incontrovertible. It was clear that what you were saying was true.
Well, and there had been these other decisions that had his army other way. And by the way, including one that said that cross burning was symbolic speech. So I think they thought, I think the civil libertarians thought that the tide was running in their direction. To so broaden the concept of symbolic speech as to permit this kind of activity.
The idea of symbolic speech is interesting. There was a time I remember when I wore a lion's head here, and I wore a dolphin. And now as I've gotten older, I find that the turtle speaks. Ruby Hurley.
Oh, Ruby was a great lady. She was the regional director of the AACP. And we worked together on a number of occasions and various issues relating to desegregation. We were on both in the group that worked on the desegregation of the hospitals. You remember I talked about sorry, that was huge, yeah. And we were both members of the committee, an informal committee of intergroup relations workers in the South who were dealing with race relations. The committee had no formal structure, but the Southern Regional Council served as kind of a secretariat to call people together 3 or 4 times a year who were working on desegregation issues so that we could just exchange ideas and let the others know what we were up to and what we were doing. The purposes of coordination. So Ruby was a member of that group. And as I say, we worked on a number of issues relating to desegregation. Ruby led the desegregation of the University of Georgia at Athens. And her assistant at the time was Running Jordan. And I guess that's when I first got to meet Bryant.
Probably was impressive then.
Yes. Ruby, God was a beautiful woman. And she was beautifully turned out. I mean, she dressed impeccably. And she had lovely hair. So, I mean, she was an impressive and imposing personality.
Yeah. NAACP, not the Urban League.
Oh, well, the Urban League was part of that group that would meet with us from time to time. But the NAACP was more cutting edge in those days than the Urban League ever was.
Yeah. Grace Hamilton and Robert Brisbane.
Oh, yes. Well, after I left the American Jewish Committee, and before I worked as ADL, Civil Rights Director in Southern Council, I worked for a year and a half as the Executive Director of the Atlanta Charter Commission. The Atlanta Charter Commission had been established by the state legislature to prepare a new charter for the city of Atlanta, which had not had a new charter in 100 years. And needless to say, the old charter was pretty much out of date. And anyways, the sponsor of that legislation was Grace Hamilton. And Grace understood that it was important that the city move to a strong mayor form of government before a black mayor was elected, while we still had a white mayor. The white mayor that we still had was Sam Russell, I might add, who was also a friend of mine. But under the old system, we had what was called the weak mayor form of government. Now, people like William B. Hartsfield and I have now made it work through the force of their personalities, not because of legal authority. For example, during what was called the hippie invasion of the 1960s, a lot of hippies set up kind of campgrounds at Piedmont Park. Each department of city government was responsible not to the mayor. Mayor didn't supervise the department, but a city council or committee of the Board of Aldermen, as it was then called, supervised each department. So the Parks Department, which reported not to the mayor but to the City Council Parks Committee, said this is not a parks problem, this is a police problem. The police department said this is not a police problem, this is the park problem. Now there had to be somebody with authority to bang some heads together and to resolve the conflict. That's why you needed a strong mayor form of government, so that both departments would be responsible to the same executive.
It's ironic that the hippies, who were philosophically opposed to regulation, to foster trade.
But that was the most glaring example of the need for a strong mayor form of government. So Grace Hamilton introduced the legislation, which was passed, and she became the vice chairman of the commission. And Emmett Bondurant, who is an outstanding lawyer here in Atlanta, distinguished member of the bar. Emmett Bondurant became the chairman, and they selected me as the executive director. I mean, Grace really, Emmett didn't know me at that time, but Grace knew me because I had known Grace socially and I guess professionally too. And Grace thought I would be appropriate for that role because I had experience both as a lawyer and in community relations. And if you're drafting a new charter, you can draft the best legal document in the world, but you can't if you don't win community support for it. It goes into the trash can. So you needed both the legal training and the community relations skills to help get the new charter through. So I served for a year and a half on that as executive director of that group. And one of the leading figures of the group was Dr. Robert Brisbane, who was the head of the political science department at Morehouse College. And I had not known Dr. Brisbane before, but we became very good friends on that commission. And he provided important leadership. One of the things that pleased me the most about the Atlanta Charter Commission is that we had hundreds and hundreds of votes on that commission. And we vote sometimes on a whole paragraph, or sometimes on a single sentence, or even occasionally a vote on what word to use. Well, in all those votes, there wasn't a single vote on that Charter Commission which divided racially, in which all the blacks voted one way and all the whites voted the other way. Not a single time did that happen, and that's because of people like Bob Brisbane and Grace Hamilton, who provided the leadership, to do a good job on this.
I think they've got to check the time that we got on the tape.
Yes, I think it was.
Okay, here's a name that will jar some memories in it. Fred Robinette.
During about the last 3 years before my retirement, I worked as an active member of the Georgia Committee on Civil Rights under color of law. And this committee, which was mostly law enforcement people, almost entirely law enforcement people, prepared a manual for police departments to prevent the excessive use of force by police officers during incidents or while making arrests and so forth. Actually, we started work on it shortly before the Rodney King case in Los Angeles. But the Rodney King case illustrates how the unfortunate use of excessive force by police can really tear a community up. Well, we wound up producing a manual, and this is what it looked like.
Annals of Prevention, the Handbook for Law Enforcement, is it?
Yes, and the governor thought so well of Zell Miller that he had copies of it mailed to all of the law enforcement agencies in the state of Georgia. I think it was a very good job, and I think it's been a factor in helping us to avoid Rodney King type incidents or some of the kinds of incidents that they've had in the New York City Police Department in recent years involving excessive force. And because this is a very comprehensive plan in which it makes suggestions for not only how they behave during an incident, during an arrest, but how you do recruiting, how you do training, how you do disciplinary activity, personnel policies, and so forth, all designed to eliminate from the ranks of law enforcement officers who are inclined to violence and to disrespect and disregard of the civil rights of citizens.
Far-reaching effects. Do you know whether other states have picked it up?
I don't. But I think it would be very helpful if they did.
Maybe one of the governors' conferences, if they had annually, somebody fit us ahead.
Well, they're talking now of reprinting it and recirculating it again.
Well, we have a little bit of time left. I mean, there were a couple notes that I had that the people that you mentioned in our conversations, that Archbishop Paladin, Cardinal Burby.
Let me first refer, because the issue of posting Ten Commandments is a live political. Yeah, there was a case involving the posting of the Ten Commandments in the Cobb County Courthouse that Eleanor Elliott Leventhal and I got involved in, and we submitted an amicus brief, and we won the case. And the Ten Commandments are no longer displayed at the Cobb County Courthouse.
There's a move afoot today to tip them back.
To put them back, or in classrooms particularly. Okay, now what? But with Archbishop Paladin was a remarkable man. You could almost see the halo.
Well, we have less than a minute or take left. Is there something in particular that you would like to say in closing?
Yes, what I would like to say is my proudest accomplishment. What I'm most proud of is that I'm the father of 3 great children, David, Robert, and Ruth, and they have grown up to be exemplary human beings and fine citizens. And if I had done nothing else in my lifetime, the fact that Eleanor and I parented such great kids, I think that would be a sufficient reward in my contribution of .0001.
Definitely.